Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Wednesday, the 19th of January. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined this Wednesday morning, as ever, by Joshua Barrie. How are we doing, Joshua?
Yeah, fine, Derek. Disappointing performance and result last night, wasn't it? But not the return we were hoping for. You'll hear in the background someone has decided to blow leaves at 9 o'clock outside my flat. So I do apologise for the background noise.
Yeah. Hopefully, that's him finished. We can hear it slightly in the background, but yeah, hopefully that doesn't put you off watching us this morning, folks. Remember, if you haven't already done so, if you're watching us on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss a video when we go live. And we've still got that outrageously good value offer on just now, where it's absolutely free to subscribe to the Rangers Review website for the first month. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. Thereafter, it's just £2.99 a month to support top quality journalism covering the club you love. Okay, let's get our teeth stuck into last night. Joshua, Rangers were back in action after a 3-week break up at Pittodrie against Aberdeen. The team was pretty much similar to what we thought it might be, although the big surprise was James Sands given his full debut. He started the game in place of John Lundstrom. And the game was a bit of a bitty game, to be fair. Not much in it. Rangers, of course, opened the scoring after a contentious penalty call that Aberdeen were claiming that McGregor conceded with regards to Ryan Hedges. Rangers went up the park and scored. Tremendously well worked goal. Lovely ball from Ryan Kent into the path of Yanis Hadji, who volleyed into the back of the net. But Rangers just couldn't build on their lead, and Aberdeen came out second half and got a penalty. It was a penalty. It was clear as day. There's nothing Alfredo Morelos could have done. It was harsh in that regard, but letter of the law, it was a penalty kick. I'm not too sure. I think Lewis Ferguson, if he had missed that, he'd have been claiming for it to be retaken since the ball was rolling quite a fair bit, but he stuck the penalty away, and that's how it ended up. What was your main takeaways from the game, Joshua? I seem to cold, light-hearted day. I think a point at Pittodrie in the grand scheme of things isn't the worst result in the world. But from that winning position, do you think that Rangers really had a missed opportunity to take all three?
I mean, it genuinely was a terrible game of football from sometimes you have games like Man City, Chelsea at the weekend. It wasn't a great game in terms of chances, but at least it's interesting, and it's almost a bit more like a chess game. Last night was terrible, and you're always waiting for Rangers to click into gear, and they never did. Looking at stats this morning, Derek, and Rangers' top 5 common pass combinations, so the most regular 5 players that passed one another, had an XG of 0. So basically that means that there was no attacking combinations, no good link up from back to front, from middle to front. It was just terrible. I actually thought in some ways it wasn't too dissimilar to the performance at Tynecastle. You just didn't have 2 moments of brilliance at the start. I thought that, we spoke a lot there the last couple of days about why maybe Kent should play centrally. Hadji scored, but I thought in possession he was poor. Rangers seemed to bypass the middle of the pitch a lot, which I think didn't really give Sands and Kamara a chance. So it was frustrating, and I think you're right. Listen, a point isn't the worst result in the world. I was speaking to a good friend of the show, Stevie Clifford, last night about it, and I said, if you go to Tynecastle, Easter Road, and Pittodrie, and you take 7 out of 9 back in the start of December, you'd take it. You'd be relatively happy. But I think, given consideration to the fact that performance was so abysmal and slow, that's a disappointment. I thought Van Bronckhorst was, there's a reason he's the manager, because he was immediately full of perspective. There is games like this in a 38-game season. You're not going to dominate every game. Along with the Dundee United game, that was definitely the worst game of his tenureship so far. So yeah, lots of slightly concerning factors, but hopefully it can be resigned to just one game, Derek, and maybe just a factor of, the team would have played better if they'd went into that with a little bit of momentum after the winter break. It was, as I said, they never really did get started.
Yeah, is it a worry for you? I mean, they've had 3 weeks, and you asked the manager about this on Monday. with what he's been working on. But they just looked a bit flat, Joshua, and they certainly missed Joe Aribo. I think they struggled against Dundee United when he was benched for that game, of course, with the worry that he might pick up a yellow card, and they sort of struggled to break them down. And it was similar against Aberdeen as well. Not many chances created, as you say. In the second half, apart from Alfredo Morelos' volley, there was little else. Is that a concern that we couldn't see more from Rangers in that game, given that they've had a few weeks to prepare?
Yeah, I think you've seen the effects of the players that they were missing, none more so than Joe Aribo, and within that system that has worked well, specifically at Tynecastle for that opening period. The Rangers were reliant on Joe Aribo in particular for that second goal, and as I say, I thought the game largely passed Yanis Hadji by. Rangers tried to attack early in the game. You've seen switches by both Goldson and Bassey. And it was clear that was the intent. And switches of play led to the first goal. Scott Wright almost managed to get one-on-one after the ball was cut across to him by Bassey. But I thought Rangers outside of that lacked, not so much in possession, I did think they lacked ideas actually. When they had, the Rangers made just over 300 passes, but the more concerning stat for me, Derek, was the pass completion was 75%. Now, Rangers' average away from home is 82%, and pass completion obviously kind of stipulates not only how well are the team playing if they're finding the men, but how they're coping with pressure, if they're managing to play under pressure and play in pressurised areas. And Rangers really didn't. Can you think of a single period of that game in which they built up some pressure around the Aberdeen box and had a couple of chances in a row where they managed to really build an attack as a team? It was really poor, and justifiably that's concerning because it's Rangers, and that's the expectation you go into every game, regardless of the fact that obviously you can't play well in every game of a 38-game season. And that's the reality of it. So yeah, the frustrating thing was they never really got started. I think Joe Aribo was a really big miss. And that aside, Rangers looked a little bit limited in possession without him going beyond the ball. Yanis Hadji did show at times, but as I say, I think the game largely passed him by apart from his goal. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the big talking points. Kevin Clancy dominated debate last night, Joshua. Wasn't his best of games, it's fair to say. Some of the decisions were ridiculous. The penalty call in the first half, I could see if he would have gave it, and I could also see why he never gave it. I think it's the slightest of touches, so I wouldn't really becry on that one. But going forward, a number of questionable decisions. Let's talk about the sending off for a start. Ryan Kent, 2 yellow card offences. Were either of them yellows, Joshua?
Do you know, I remember going back to the Old Firm game that Kevin Clancy refereed in 2019, where he gives the penalty for Niko Katic, against Niko Katic. I can't remember who he was holding in the box, the one that McGregor saves from Christie. And it's one of these ones where you could say yes, that's a yellow card for Kent, but as Clancy kind of didn't go on to do in that game, if you give a penalty for that, you're going to have to give a penalty at every single corner kick that you referee ever, and in that game. And I think that's the frustration. And listen, I think people understand that referees will have bad days, but I think yesterday was just, it was poor. The game was constantly slowed down. I thought the fact that Kent was sent off for that second tackle was just ridiculous. And I don't know what else there is to say about that. I don't think there's much kind of justification for it. I thought Van Bronckhorst's comments were interesting on it because he said, look, this is a type of ground, as a away ground, people are going to shout for fouls, and you need to be wise to that. And Kent maybe wasn't, but equally, you shouldn't have been sent off, Derek, and it was, it limited any possibility of going and winning the game.
Yeah, the Bonabarsic situation sort of puzzled me as well, Josh. At the end of the game, he was elbowed by Johnny Hayes, clear as day, and you could see blood coming from his nose. Right in front of the linesman who was there. He showed that he had blood coming from his nose, but the officials deemed that it wasn't enough for him to receive treatment until it was pointed out when Aberdeen had a free kick late on. So Rangers had to go down to 9 men and to defend a set piece when it was clear as day that it got worse. Barisic's nose, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was, and I think the more frustrating thing in regard to that, Derek, is that when you do have, and you'll get away games like this, and wrong decisions and the performance, the best way I think to counter that is to just go and play the team off the park, go and rise above it, and show that you're better than them. And Rangers never did that. Rangers are a better team in possession than Aberdeen, but last night they didn't show it. And I think that's the real frustration. I think that's the way Van Bronckhorst would have wanted his team to respond. I think he doesn't seem like a manager that gets dragged into, necessarily arguing with discussions after the game or complaining in that regard. So the frustration for Rangers definitely comes not only in the fact that these things went against him. You're right, they have to defend that free kick with 9 men and whatnot, even though Borna Barisic has been elbowed, but more so that they didn't respond really in the correct manner, which was to go and show they were a better team. So yeah, and I'm sure we'll get onto the substitution, but I thought that was questionable, to say the least.
Yeah, I've got to admit, at the time, I could understand it. I felt that it would either be Sands or Scott Wright that was taken off. John Lundstrom, of course, brought on for Scott Wright. Gavin Sloan mentions, gets in touch. Hi, Gavin. The tactics were poor overall in decision. Why take Wright off for Lundstrom with 30 minutes to go sitting in? It was also negative all night. What do you make of the substitution then, Joshua? You've obviously looking to add a bit of steel in midfield and try and contain Aberdeen, but it does invite pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think more so what it did is it had you away from the number 10 position and just allowed Aberdeen at the base of midfield to play into the Rangers' final third almost unopposed. So if you had the game, you're contesting for control in that area, Rangers almost afforded it to them, which I think is the most disappointing thing. If you look at the trend line, which will be out in the Rangers review later, which just explains the quality of chances throughout the game, Aberdeen's best spells all came after that, when they were able to start their attacks closer to goal. And I thought that was, I thought it was a poor decision. Some managers will like to not even necessarily defend by attacking and thinking that's the best way to retain their advantage in the game, but by retaining pressure a little bit higher up the pitch and making sure that the opposition team still has to earn the right in and around the box. The St Mirren win's a good example of that earlier this season, 2-1 away from home, where I think they had one shot in the second half on target, if that, because Rangers just defended high up the pitch. And it was actually something that Nathan Patterson was really useful in a few games this season, and coming on to defend high up the pitch. So I thought that substitution was strange. I don't think Lundstrom did terribly, but it was more the fact that, as I say, Rangers took a player out of that area and that invited a lot of pressure. So that's something that I'm sure the manager will look at. He said himself he thought he had more control in the first phase of the second half, and Scott Wright goes off on 64 minutes. And I thought thereafter, Rangers only looked like they were going to lose the game. They didn't look like they were going to win it.
Yeah. The second half, James Tavernier mentioned that in his post-match interview as well, that never reached the levels that's expected of them. You can't really argue with that. James Sands made his debut, of course, as we mentioned, Joshua, last night. I felt first half he had some decent touches and sort of faded out the game somewhat in the second half. Like you say, the midfield was sort of getting bypassed. What do you make of his overall performance?
Well, I've seen a couple of tweets last night giving James Sands, calling time in his Rangers career after 90 minutes. It never fails to amuse me that I don't think you don't really need to defend why we think that's ridiculous to say, but yeah, the game passed him by a little bit. I actually thought in possession he did okay, relatively composed. He wasn't in that game necessarily. It didn't appear that Van Bronckhorst wanted his central midfielders to get on the ball and play through the pitch. I think far more often they wanted to hit the diagonals and build play that way. And obviously, like Tynecastle, because Rangers had a relatively early lead, then they sit in and they don't do that much. Joe Aribo scored a really important goal at Tynecastle, and in that whole game, he made 20 passes, Derek. That's the type of game it was, and it was similar last night, although in this occasion, Rangers didn't have a 2-goal lead, and they were pinned back to only take a point back to Ibrox. So I thought he did okay. You know, it's a hard game to judge him on, and I'm sure he will have better games for Rangers. I think that's a pretty fair summation of his performance.
Yeah, but overall, Joshua, I mean, I think it's important not to, as the saying goes, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think Van Bronckhorst still undefeated as manager. That's the second goal he's conceded domestically. The first was an own goal. The second, a penalty. Is there a bit of realism for folk? Maybe I've seen a lot of anger last night, which is common with Rangers when they drop points, of course, such as the demands of the club. But all things considered, a below par for performance. It could have been worse, I think, in the grand scheme of things. So coming away with a point, as Stevie Clifford says in his piece on the website this morning, just a case of resetting it and going again.
Yeah, and also you've got to remember, I think, that the build up to this game was about almost a month, and people have missed football so much, and as such, anticipation was pretty great, and you expect to be entertained when you watch your team, and last night that certainly didn't come to fruition. But I think you're right. I think these games will happen. Lots to improve on, lots to work on, but sometimes it is important to look at that and look at it overall and think, do you know what? 7 points from 9 out of those fixtures I mentioned is okay. We'd have taken that, but it's all about the response now. If Rangers go in and put in another apathetic away performance soon, it won't bode well. I will say, Derek, I don't think that could be the midfield for going away to Celtic Park. If Joe Rebo is not back, I won't give you my Kent chat in the middle again. But I think if Rangers are going to try and not necessarily play through the middle that much at points, then they need someone that's going to be able to contribute higher up the park. I know Hadji scored a goal last night, but I mean more with runs in behind and turning and running at the defence. So yeah, a lot to work on. And in all regards, a point gained. That all the stats show that Aberdeen dominated and had higher quality chances. Rangers are still 4 points clear. The 6 point gap happens after Celtic drop points, and the Rangers have dropped a couple of points. That's how it goes. And hopefully it's Friday night. We'll give a chance to see some youngsters and a few goals, and then you move on and try and get 3 more points in the Premiership.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I like your point there about the midfield. It ties in nicely with Aldo, who's got in touch here. He says we need to bring in an attacking midfielder in this window. Too many defensive midfielders, but too few attacking options. What do you make of that point, Joshua? Do you think I've seen a few comments last night as well saying I think it's common knowledge that Rangers are keen to bring in a right winger, but do they need another option, an attacking midfielder, do you think, before the window closes?
Well, I mean, I think it all depends how Van Bronckhorst wants his midfield to play, and I think that's probably still up for a little bit of debate. Certainly away from home, it seems like, as I've mentioned a few times, it seems to be more attacking down the wings, attacking a little bit more directly, attacking transition. Maybe that's just a little bit more of a stopgap until his team become better in possession away from home. I think Sands and Kamara are both really good on the ball, and Kamara has improved playing through the midfield. But you notice the absence without Joe Rebo, not only because he can receive high up the pitch, and he's almost a little bit of a target man in the middle of the pitch in terms of the way that the ball sticks to him, but also just the threat of that and the way that teams have to account for that. Yanis Hadji, for all his qualities, isn't gonna turn you and carry the ball 30 yards to goal. That's why Scott Brown could go so tight on him towards the end of that match. So I think it would depend on the options that Rangers want to attack with. I wouldn't be opposed to another number 8 coming in, who can do that, who can turn the ball and play forwards. I think yesterday Rangers lacked that, but I think hopefully that's something that James Sands can grow into in his Ibrox career. As I say, let's not completely judge him after 190 minutes, in which I thought he had a decent game. You couldn't complain too much about his performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll finish up. I Am Crabbit gets in touch here. He says, 1 loss in 60. We move on, no point dwelling. I think that sums it up quite well indeed. Okay, folks, that'll do us there. Thanks to, again, as ever, for everyone getting in touch. It really is much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, if you're watching us on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button. so you'll never miss a video when we go live, and also to take advantage of our fantastic offer just now on the site, rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. It's absolutely free for the first month, £2.99 a month thereafter. We've got some great content on there this morning. As we mentioned, an opinion piece from Stevie Clifford from the Four Lads Had a Dream blog on last night's events. We've also got all the reaction from Giovanni van Bronckhorst and James Tavernier as well. Okay, we'll be back again tomorrow, but until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.